The research boat floated in calm water off the coast of the Bahamas. Below the surface, a hydrophone array hung motionless, and next to it, an underwater speaker connected to a laptop running software that had taken 3 years to develop. The marine biology team had spent decades recording dolphin sounds. Now they were about to do something no one had ever successfully attempted. They were going to speak back. The AI had analyzed over 30 years of recordings and identified patterns that human ears could never detect. It had learned the rules of dolphin communication, the structure beneath the chaos of clicks and whistles. Using those rules, it generated a synthetic vocalization, a sequence that followed dolphin grammar but had never been produced by an actual dolphin. The team called it a greeting based on patterns associated with peaceful approach behavior. They played the sound into the water and waited. The response came within 2 minutes. A bottlenose dolphin appeared from the blue, circled the boat once, and began vocalizing. The sounds were not random. The AI immediately flagged the response as structured, rule-following, contextually appropriate. The dolphin was not mimicking what it heard. It was answering. The interaction continued for nearly 8 minutes. Back and forth, sound and response. The team on the boat barely breathed. Some of them had spent their entire careers hoping for this moment. A few cried, others laughed in disbelief. This was the breakthrough everyone had dreamed about for half a century. Proof that dolphins could engage in something resembling dialogue. But the celebration did not last. As the AI continued processing the exchange and cross-referencing the dolphin's responses with its database of recordings, something uncomfortable emerged. The vocalization patterns the dolphin used matched sequences recorded in very specific contexts. Near fishing operations, near boat strikes, near areas of heavy pollution. These were not the patterns associated with play or social bonding. They were patterns the AI had classified as high-stress vocalizations, urgent, repetitive, agitated. The dolphin had responded to the greeting, but the response did not look like a greeting at all. One researcher stared at the analysis on her screen and felt her excitement drain away. The AI had spoken to a wild dolphin in its own language for the first time in history, and the dolphin had answered with something that looked like a warning. Dolphins are the most studied cetaceans on Earth. For over 60 years, scientists have recorded their vocalizations, tracked their movements, and documented their social structures. Thousands of hours of audio sit in databases around the world. Researchers have long suspected that dolphin communication was more complex than simple animal calls. The evidence was everywhere. Dolphins recognized themselves in mirrors. They used tools. They taught their young specific hunting techniques that varied by region. They played games with rules. They grieved their dead. But understanding what they were actually saying remained impossible. Human ears cannot process the speed and frequency range of dolphin sound. Human brains cannot hold the volume of data required to find patterns across decades of recordings. We knew dolphins were intelligent. We just could not crack the code. The difference now is artificial intelligence, machine learning systems that never tire, never miss patterns, and never impose assumptions. Feed the algorithm 30 years of recordings tagged with behavioral context, and let it find structure. The AI was not told what to look for. It discovered rules on its own, grammar, syntax, individual identity markers, and contextual variation that changed based on who was speaking and who was listening. Dolphin communication was not random noise. It was organized, consistent, learnable. It was language, and the patterns emerging from areas of human activity were not the patterns of contentment. Dolphins have been humanity's favorite marine animal for as long as anyone can remember. We put them in theme parks and taught them tricks. We paid money to swim with them on vacation. We tattooed them on our skin and painted them on our children's walls. We made movies about them saving drowning swimmers and guiding lost sailors home. We believed in some unexamined way that dolphins liked us, that their permanent smiles meant something, that the bond between our species was mutual. The AI suggests a different story. For 50 years, researchers recorded dolphin voices and heard only songs. Beautiful, mysterious, endlessly fascinating songs. We studied the sounds, cataloged them, and published papers about them. We never stopped to consider that we might be documenting something else entirely. The translation is not complete. It may never be. But the patterns are becoming clear, and the message emerging from decades of data is not the one humanity expected to hear. We thought we were listening to music. The AI found something closer to testimony. The first clue came in the 1960s. Researchers working with captive dolphins noticed something strange about the sounds they made. Each dolphin produced a unique whistle pattern that no other dolphin in the group used. The patterns were consistent. The same dolphin made the same whistle over and over, day after day, year after year, and other dolphins seemed to recognize these patterns. When one dolphin whistled, specific individuals would respond. Scientists called these signature whistles. Every dolphin develops one during the first year of life, a sonic fingerprint that stays with them until they die. But the discovery went further than simple identification. Researchers found that dolphins did not just produce their own signature whistles. They also produced the signature whistles of other dolphins. A mother calling for her calf would use the calf's whistle, not her own. A dolphin seeking a specific companion in murky water would broadcast that companion's whistle into the dark. They were using names, not labels assigned by humans, but names created by dolphins for dolphins, learned and remembered and used with purpose. This was the first hard evidence that dolphin communication might be something more than instinct. But scientists in the 1960s were not ready to accept the implications. They classified signature whistles as contact calls, compared them to a dog barking or a bird singing, and moved on. The possibility that dolphins had invented a naming system was too strange to take seriously. The complexity we ignored was staggering. Dolphins do not just whistle, they click at frequencies up to 150 kilohertz, far beyond human hearing range. They produce burst pulses, rapid sequences of sound that blur together into something resembling a buzzing or creaking noise. They combine these elements in ways that vary by context, by audience, by emotional state. A single vocalization can contain layers of information packed into fractions of a second. Frequency modulations happen faster than human perception can track. Timing variations measured in milliseconds change the apparent meaning of otherwise identical sounds. For decades, researchers tried to categorize these sounds by hand. They listened to recordings at reduced speed, made notes, created classification systems. But the task was impossible. Too much data, too many variables, too fast for human processing. A researcher could spend an entire career studying a single dolphin population and never find the patterns hidden inside the noise. We were listening with human ears to a communication system built for a different kind of brain. Dolphin brains process auditory information far faster than ours. They hear details we cannot perceive. They produce sounds we cannot fully detect. Trying to understand dolphin language with human senses was like trying to read a book by looking at it through frosted glass. We could see that something was there. We just could not make out the words. The failed translation attempts of the 20th century proved that dolphins could learn language. They just did not prove that dolphins had one. In the 1960s and 70s, researchers taught captive dolphins to understand artificial symbol systems. The dolphins excelled. They grasped syntax, understanding that the order of symbols changed meaning. They followed complex commands involving multiple objects and actions. They demonstrated comprehension of abstract concepts like absent objects and future events. Their performance rivaled that of great apes and sometimes exceeded it. But this approach had a fundamental flaw. Scientists were teaching dolphins human language instead of learning theirs. Every breakthrough in those studies told us about dolphin intelligence and dolphin comprehension. It told us nothing about what dolphins naturally said to each other. We spent decades proving that dolphins could understand us while ignoring the possibility that they had been speaking all along. The breakthrough required flipping the approach entirely. Instead of teaching dolphins our symbols, researchers needed to decode the symbols dolphins had already invented. Instead of testing comprehension, they needed to analyze production. Instead of asking whether dolphins could learn language, they needed to ask whether dolphins already had one. Human researchers could not do this work. The data was too vast, the patterns too subtle, the processing speed too far beyond biological limits. But machines could. Artificial intelligence changed everything. Machine learning systems do not get tired. They do not miss patterns. They do not impose assumptions about what communication should look like. Feed the algorithm 3 decades of recordings tagged with behavioral observations and let it find structure without being told what to look for. The AI found rules, patterns that held across different pods, different oceans, different decades. Structure that was not random, not instinctive, not simple. Dolphin communication was organized, consistent, learnable. It was language. And now, for the first time, humans had the tools to understand what it was saying. Dr. Denise Hertzing first entered the water with wild dolphins in 1985. She was a graduate student then, uncertain whether a lifetime studying a single population of animals would yield anything meaningful. Nearly 4 decades later, the Wild Dolphin Project she founded represents the longest continuous study of wild dolphins in history. There are 3 generations of spotted dolphins swimming in the shallow waters off the Bahamas. Individuals she has known since birth, watched grow up, watched raise their own calves, watched grow old and disappear. She knows their names, the ones they gave themselves, their signature whistles burned into her memory from thousands of hours underwater. But knowing who they were did not mean understanding what they said. For 30 years, Hertzing recorded every vocalization she could capture. Hundreds of thousands of clicks, whistles, and burst pulses were stored in databases that grew larger every season. She documented behavior alongside sound, noting what dolphins were doing when they made specific noises. Hunting, playing, fighting, nursing, greeting, mourning. The data accumulated year after year, a monument to patience and dedication. But the patterns that would unlock meaning remained hidden inside noise too complex for human analysis. Then, artificial intelligence researchers approached with a proposal that would change everything. Combine 3 decades of behavioral observation with machine learning pattern recognition. Use the richest data set of wild dolphin communication ever assembled to train an algorithm that could find structure humans could not perceive. The collaboration brought together marine biologists who understood dolphin society and computer scientists who knew how to teach machines to listen. The technology they deployed transformed the ocean into a laboratory. Hydrophone arrays captured every sound within range, multiple underwater microphones recording continuously and triangulating the source of each vocalization. When a dolphin clicked, the system knew which dolphin had made the sound based on position and acoustic fingerprint. Wearable tags attached with suction cups tracked individual animals through the water, logging depth, speed, direction, and proximity to other dolphins. Video documentation captured social interactions in detail, showing who approached whom, who fled, who fought, who played. Every sound now had context. The AI did not just hear a whistle, it knew which dolphin produced the whistle, which dolphins were nearby, what behavior preceded and followed the sound, what time of day it occurred, and what social situation surrounded it. This contextual richness was essential. Language is not just sound. Language is sound with meaning, and meaning comes from context. A word spoken at a funeral carries different weight than the same word spoken at a celebration. The AI needed to understand not just what dolphins said, but when and why they said it. The machine converted sound into spectrograms, visual representations of acoustic patterns that displayed frequency, duration, and intensity as images rather than audio. What human ears heard as a blur of clicks became a detailed picture the AI could analyze pixel by pixel. It measured timing between sounds at the millisecond level. It compared vocalizations across individuals, across families, across situations spanning decades. It searched for patterns that repeated, rules that held, exceptions that proved structure existed. The grammar discovery shattered assumptions that had limited dolphin research for generations. The AI found rules that govern dolphin communication the same way grammar governs human language. Certain whistle patterns always preceded certain behaviors. Specific click sequences appeared only in specific social situations. The order of sounds mattered, with the same elements arranged differently carrying different contextual associations. Dolphins modified their signature whistles when addressing different individuals. Speaking to a close associate produced one variation. Speaking to a stranger produced another. It was the acoustic equivalent of changing your tone when talking to a friend versus talking to a boss. Young dolphins made errors that adults appeared to correct. Calves produced malformed whistles and clicks that slowly improved over months and years of practice. This was not instinct unfolding on a predetermined schedule. This was language learning. The same messy process of trial and error that human children go through when acquiring speech. Different pods use different dialects. Regional variations in how sounds were produced, which patterns were common, which combinations were preferred. A dolphin from the Bahamas did not sound like a dolphin from the Mediterranean. And when dolphins moved between groups, their vocalizations shifted over time, adapting to match their new social environment. They were not born knowing how to speak. They learned from the community around them. The AI could predict what sound would come next, based on context. With accuracy far beyond chance, it could identify which dolphin was speaking from acoustic properties alone. It could detect when a dolphin made what appeared to be a grammatical error and then self-corrected, repeating a sequence with subtle modifications as if fixing a mistake. This was not patterned noise. This was structured communication with rules complex enough to be broken and corrected. The playback experiments tested whether the discovered structure was truly language or merely a statistical artifact. The team used AI to generate synthetic dolphin vocalizations, sequences that followed the rules the machine had learned but had never been produced by an actual dolphin. These were original sentences in dolphin language written by artificial intelligence. They played these sounds into the water near wild dolphins who had never encountered the research boat before. The responses were immediate and unmistakable. Dolphins approached the underwater speaker, circled it, and vocalized directly at the source. They did not flee or ignore the sounds. They engaged. The exchanges continued for minutes at a time, far longer than random curiosity would explain. The AI analyzed the responses and found them structurally appropriate, following the same rules, maintaining the same contextual patterns that natural dolphin conversation displayed. One experiment generated a greeting pattern based on sequences dolphins used when initiating peaceful contact. Within 90 seconds, a wild female approached the speaker. She produced her signature whistle, identifying herself, then added a sequence the AI classified as an approach invitation based on thousands of similar recordings. She waited. When no response came, she circled closer and vocalized again. Then she swam away. The researchers watched the data in silence. The dolphin had introduced herself by name. She had invited continued interaction. She had waited for a reply that never came. She had tried again before giving up. This was not an animal reacting to noise. This was an individual attempting communication and recognizing when the attempt had failed. The machine had learned to speak. The dolphins had answered. And now the real question emerged from the data with terrible clarity. If dolphins had language, what had they been saying all these years while humans recorded without understanding? The AI was about to provide an answer that nobody wanted to hear. The AI did not stop at analyzing social communication. The real power of machine learning lies in comparison across massive data sets, finding correlations that human researchers would never have the time or processing capacity to detect. The team fed the algorithm recordings tagged with environmental context: dolphins near fishing operations, dolphins near heavy boat traffic, dolphins near pollution discharge zones, dolphins near naval sonar exercises, dolphins in quiet, undisturbed waters far from human activity. The patterns were unmistakable and deeply unsettling. Vocalizations recorded near human activity differed systematically from vocalizations recorded in pristine environments. The differences were not random variations. They were consistent across pods that had never encountered each other, across oceans separated by thousands of miles, across decades of recordings. Dolphins near fishing operations produced faster sequences with higher pitch variation. Dolphins near loud boat engines used repetitive patterns that appeared nowhere else in the database. Dolphins fleeing trawler nets made sounds that matched with statistical precision across completely unrelated populations. The AI classified these as high-stress vocalizations based on behavioral correlations. When dolphins made these sounds, they were also fleeing, diving, clustering their calves into protected positions, abandoning feeding grounds. The acoustic patterns predicted the behavior. Stress sounds meant stress responses, and stress sounds appeared overwhelmingly in one context, near humans. The teaching discovery transformed unsettling data into something far more disturbing. Researchers had long known that dolphin mothers were intensely protective of their calves. They nursed for years, kept their young close, guided them through the complexities of dolphin social life. But the AI found something nobody expected. Mothers with calves near human activity produced unique vocalization sequences that did not appear in mothers swimming in quiet waters. And those sequences reappeared years later when the calves, now independent, encountered human activity on their own. Dolphins were teaching their children about threats, not through instinct, but through language. The data was specific enough to track individual lineages. A mother who survived entanglement in fishing gear used particular patterns whenever boats approached. Her calf, recorded 5 years later as a young adult, used those exact patterns when boats approached, even boats that posed no actual threat. The fear response had been transmitted. The information had been passed. The young dolphin had learned from her mother's experience without ever experiencing the trauma herself. researchers identified what they began calling trauma markers. Vocalization patterns appeared in dolphins who had experienced specific human-caused harm and persisted in their communication for years afterward. A dolphin who lost a calf to a boat strike continued producing particular sequences long after the event, sequences associated with distress and alarm, sequences that appeared in her vocalizations when boats were nowhere nearby. The acoustic signature of grief embedded in daily communication. But the most chilling finding was how these trauma markers spread. Dolphins who had never experienced entanglement or boat strikes or pollution exposure began using patterns that originated with dolphins who had. The information moved through populations like a story passed between survivors. They were learning fear from each other's testimony. The language carried warnings that outlived the original danger, creating a cultural memory of threat that accumulated over generations. The AI could not translate meaning the way humans understand words. It could not produce a dictionary or a transcript, but it could map patterns to consistent contexts with overwhelming statistical confidence. Certain sequences appeared only near fishing nets and nowhere else in 3 decades of recordings. Certain sequences appeared only after a pod member died. Certain sequences appeared only when mothers with calves encountered boats. The correlations were too strong to dismiss as coincidence. Dolphins had specific vocalizations tied to specific categories of experience, categories that included fishing, boats, pollution, death, separation, danger, and flight. The AI could not tell researchers what the sounds meant in dolphin terms, but it could show that the sounds had meaning, that they were used consistently, that dolphins recognized them across contexts. When researchers played recordings from near fishing operations to dolphins swimming in quiet, protected waters, the responses matched alarm patterns. The dolphins who had never seen a fishing boat reacted to the sounds of dolphins who had. They recognized the content even without the context. They knew what those sounds meant. The most disturbing discovery emerged from comparing isolated populations to those living near chronic human activity. Dolphins in remote areas used a communication repertoire that remained relatively stable over decades. But dolphins near busy coastlines had developed vocalizations that appeared nowhere in recordings from pristine environments. New patterns, new sequences, new combinations that followed grammatical rules but contained acoustic elements the isolated populations never used. New words for new threats. Their language was evolving to describe us. The AI could not produce a transcript of what dolphins were saying. The translation was incomplete and might remain so forever. But the patterns told a story that required no dictionary to understand. Urgent, consistent, learned, shared, expanding. In areas of heavy human activity, dolphin communication was dominated by threat-related content. The beautiful songs researchers had recorded for 50 years were not celebrations of ocean life. They were something else entirely. Some scientists described it as constant background anxiety translated into sound. Others reached for a word that carried more weight, a word that implied not just feeling, but documentation. Testimony. Dolphins had been reporting on human activity for decades, recording what happened to them, teaching it to their children, sharing it with strangers, building a cultural archive of harm. Every entanglement, every boat strike, every poisoned fish, every dead calf had been noted in a language humans could not understand. We thought we were listening to nature. We were listening to evidence, and the case it built was not in our favor. Dolphins are not alone. The same artificial intelligence techniques being applied to bottlenose dolphins are now being deployed across cetacean species worldwide. Sperm whales clicking in the Caribbean, orcas calling in the North Atlantic, humpbacks singing in the Pacific, belugas chattering beneath Arctic ice. The findings are consistent in ways that should make humanity deeply uncomfortable. Every species studied shows complex communication with structure that resembles language. Every species demonstrates cultural transmission, behaviors and vocalizations passed from generation to generation through teaching rather than instinct. Every species displays contextual adaptation, changing how they communicate based on circumstances. And in every species recorded near human activity, the same patterns emerge. Stress markers, warning sequences, threat vocabularies that do not exist in populations living far from human interference. The ocean is full of intelligent minds. Minds that have been communicating for millions of years. Minds that have watched human presence expand across every coastline, every shipping lane, every fishing ground. And many of those minds appear to be talking about us. The behavioral evidence has been accumulating for years, dismissed as coincidence or local variation until the linguistic data gave it new meaning. Dolphins in some regions have stopped approaching boats entirely. Populations that once sought human contact, swimming alongside vessels and performing for cameras, now flee at the first sound of an engine. In the Mediterranean, entire communities have abandoned traditional feeding grounds near busy shipping lanes, relocating to less productive waters that offer the single advantage of silence. In the Gulf of Mexico, recordings made after the Deepwater Horizon disaster contain vocalization patterns that never existed before the spill. New sounds spread through the population in the years following the catastrophe. New words, perhaps, for a new kind of harm. These are not random behavioral shifts driven by individual animals making individual decisions. They are coordinated responses spreading through populations faster than any single dolphin could travel. Information is moving. Dolphins are sharing knowledge about where not to go, what sounds mean danger, which areas have become uninhabitable. The language is not just describing threats, it is organizing avoidance on a scale researchers never anticipated. Some scientists wonder if we are witnessing the early stages of something larger. A consensus is forming across cetacean communities that humans are to be treated as a permanent environmental hazard, not attacked. Dolphins are not orcas. They do not ram boats or disable rudders. They simply leave. They exclude. They withdraw contact and communication from a species they have decided is not worth the risk. The smiling creatures who once greeted every vessel are learning to disappear. For decades, humanity treated dolphins as entertainment. We captured them from the wild and put them in concrete tanks. We taught them tricks and sold tickets to watch. We built entire industries around swimming with dolphins, petting dolphins, posing with dolphins. We polluted their water with chemicals and noise and plastic and called it progress. Called it economy, called it the cost of civilization. We assumed their intelligence was a curiosity rather than a complication, a fact to marvel at rather than a responsibility to consider. The AI has changed that assumption forever. If dolphins have language, they have the capacity for testimony. If they have testimony, they have perspective. If they have perspective, they have something resembling judgment. And the patterns emerging from 30 years of recordings suggest that judgment has already been rendered. The translation is not complete. It may never be. The full complexity of dolphin communication might remain beyond human comprehension, even with artificial intelligence as an interpreter. But the structure is clear. The patterns are consistent. The message is emerging from the noise with terrible clarity. Dolphins have been watching humanity for as long as we have sailed their waters. They have seen the nets and the propellers and the oil slicks and the plastic. They have heard the sonar and the engines and the explosions. They have lost calves and companions and entire communities to human activity. And through it all, they have been talking to each other in a language we could not understand. Now, for the first time, we can hear fragments of what they have concluded. The question is no longer whether humans can decode dolphin language. The question is whether we are prepared to accept what they have been saying. The ocean has been speaking for a very long time. We just learned to listen, and the words were never meant to be kind.